Welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast, where we connect, engage, and empower fathers to be the best dads they can be for their families and communities. And now, your hosts are Bruce Stapleton and Pastor Eli Williams.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams, and the unseen wizard behind the curtain is my friend Bruce Stapleton. And with me today is our guest. His name is Jason Messer, and we'll tell you a little bit more about him. First of all, let me tell you that Fathering Strong is actually very, very new. This is only our 19th episode, so we're just getting our legs under us with this. And we would appreciate your spreading the word about Fathering Strong and about the podcast. And we'll tell you a little bit more about Fathering Strong as a whole as we get a little deeper into the program. But tell a friend, especially a father friend that you have, about the Fathering Strong podcast and how they can find it on YouTube and also on some other outlets for podcasts. And we would appreciate that so much. All right, that having been said, I'm a husband, a father, and a grandfather. I'm also the author of the book, the Father Love book, The Powerful Resource Every Child Needs, and the president of Urban Light Ministries, which is the nonprofit that powers Fathering Strong. And my guest today on the Fathering Strong podcast is a friend of mine, Jason Messer. He and his wife, Cindy, are parents, and we're going to talk some about that and the unique challenges and blessings that come with parenting a special needs child. So that's our topic today. And Jason, we are so glad that you were able to join us. Thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks, Brother Eli. I'm honored by the invite. Hopefully I can share something that is of benefit to someone who may be in the similar circumstances or maybe not, but they find something of use here.
Absolutely. All right, so before we dive into this, Jason, we like to start with you telling us something about your childhood, your growing up. What is your father's story with your father, and what was the Jason Messer youth like? Let's start there.
Okay, so I actually grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was called to the ministry when he was 16, started in Southern Ohio, became a preacher boy, as they like to call him down there, and moved to Michigan, took his first church in his 20s. I was born in Detroit, lived there for 3 years, moved back down here, and then he's been here ever since. My dad was a guy who was, in spite of being on call 24/7, like pastors are, helping people in the middle of the night, being pastor, counselor, shepherd, fix-it man. He was also an outstanding husband, always present dad. He served on the Christian school board where mom and dad sent me and my sisters, always involved and always present in spite of always being busy and always sermon prepping for 3 sermons a week, which seems to be the exception nowadays versus the rule once upon a time, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And so I saw a guy who demonstrated incredible servant love for his wife. And I watched how that was done well. And, in the end of the day, they say more is caught than taught. And I caught a lot of how to be a dad and a father from him.
Yeah.
Everything.
Wow, that's tremendous. Now now that you're all grown up, I'm sure that, like me, you realize just how blessed you were to grow up in a home like that.
Oh man, it seems to be rarer and rarer. And number one, it's a home that was solid and stable. There was never a time where things were rocky in our house, and never a time where I thought, are mom and dad going to make it? Never. And it was a house I view it as a house of equals. Mom and dad were partners. There was not dad is king, and it's dad's way or the highway. They were very evenly matched, shall we say, in terms of what they gave to the home, what they provided, and it wasn't 50-50, it was 100-100. And so I learned how to respect my wife and love my wife from watching how my dad respected and loved my mom. And that relationship was tremendous. Still is tremendous, thank God.
Yes. Wow, that is so refreshing to hear. We hear so many horror stories about how traumatic the youth of so many now grown-ups were, and how that has negatively impacted their lives and the way they parent. And even in those cases, though, there are so many of them who have been resilient and who have made the commitment to be better as parents and have turned things around. And some of them are the most inspiring stories ever. So Jason, you and I had advantages over so many others, but it's still good. It's encouraging to see that even despite how rough some people's growing up was, for them to turn out as well as they did. I mean, they should be honored for that, and we try to do that on a regular basis.
Yeah,
all right, so
they're the parental superheroes. I just did what was modeled, or try to do what was modeled. It's the folks who brought themselves out of by their bootstraps or by the grace of God, through the impact of Jesus in their life, turning them around. Those are the folks who are the real people who should be on these podcasts. It was the luck of the draw, as it were.
That's very humble of you to say that. and we do try to get as many of them on here as possible. That's good. But people also need to hear stories like yours, because that will inspire them to be the best parents they can be, no matter their upbringing. So all that having been said, Jason, I want to ask you now, we're going to fast forward from your youth to your becoming a parent for the first time. How did that happen? Well, we know no details, but tell us about what it was like for you having that first child.
Yeah, so my oldest son is 24. So in the year 2000, always easy to keep track of his age since he was born in double lot, as they say. He actually came after about 17 or 18 months of very unsuccessful attempts to get pregnant. My wife and I were married probably 6 or 7 years by that point. We'd aimed for the 5-year plan. We got married at 21, which is also is an unusually early age nowadays. But that was in the early mid-90s. It was still unusual then. But so we planned for 5 years, started trying to have kids about that time, but it took a long time, and there was some heartache and there were struggles, and we went through the what you do, and the women, my wife taking her temperature, and trying to read all the body signs of, hey, now's the best time to try to make a baby, and not for lack of trying, that didn't happen for a while. And about 18 months, I think, into that, went through a period where I lost both my grandfathers in the space of 3 weeks in the fall of '99. And very shortly after that, we found out we were pregnant. And my mom, to this day, just gives credit to the Lord for the fact that in the wake of losing her dad, she got her first grandchild. And so our son Griff came around in late summer of 2000, and that was tremendous. And becoming a dad for the first time, it really feels like a blur now. I mean, it was 24 years ago. Some people can still live out and experience in their mind in full Technicolor recall everything about it. What I remember is my wife going through hours and hours of labor and then still having to have a C-section because my kid's head was just too darn big. And so he was dropping his heart rate, and the doctor said, okay, we're going to go with this another route. And next thing we know, we're in the operating suite, and my wife is having a C-section, which was ultimately fascinating and horrifying at the same time, because out came our son. And so that was amazing. But thank God for the miracle of modern medicine.
Yeah.
That's even doable, because I can imagine, 100, 200 years ago, a child whose head is just too big is, that child dies, maybe the wife dies, the mother. And so I'm just grateful that, he was able to be born that way, and he's just been nothing but a delight to our life.
That's awesome.
But we have two others, and I know you can bring them up.
Yeah. So Griff was first, and then you had a daughter, right?
Not in that order.
No?
No. Our middle son is Dominic. Dominic.
Oh, gotcha.
Dominic is 21, and heck of a story there.
Yeah. We're going to get into Dominic's story here. And we're going to take a break before that. We've got a little PSA we're going to play in afterward. We'll come back. Our guest today is Mr. Jason Messer. He's a fascinating guy. I would love to have you also, Jason, talk a little bit about your career in law enforcement and what that has been like, being in law enforcement and raising children, and how that impacted your life as a parent and as a husband. So stay with us, folks. We'll be back with Jason Messer after this.
Do you know a new father who could benefit from a basic introduction to healthy fathering principles? POPS 101, a free online course consisting of 4 one-hour sessions in English or Spanish, could be perfect for him. POPS 101 lays out practical steps toward becoming the protector, order keeper, provider, and stabilizer his child needs. Learn more at urbanlight.org.
Our guest today is Jason Messer on the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams. And Jason, we want to continue our conversation now and pick it up with your second child, your next child after Griff.
Yeah.
And this is a special story. So tell us about that.
Well, I got to back it up to the almost second child we had that
ended
up not being.
Do it.
So about 2 years after Griff was born, my mother-in-law came to us and knew of a family situation connected to her dad and a caregiver for her dad. There's a young woman who was pregnant, and they wanted to give this child up for adoption. And African-American young woman, and we went through all the steps of it was actually out of state, interstate adoption, and had to do the home study. Adoption's exhausting, as anyone who has been through it can attest, or people who've been adjacent to it can attest. You got to go through home studies and inspections, and in our case, well inspections, because we live in the country. And you got to go to adoption classes at the time, I think we had to do 6 2-hour sessions. You had to have all these background checks, submit your fingerprints. Anybody can get pregnant, but you got to get your life turned over and upside down to adopt. And I understand it. it's exhausting. So we went through this interstate adoption process, had attorneys here, attorneys there, and went through 9 months of pregnancy with this young woman, only 3 days before the due date for this little boy to be stillborn. And we were going to name him Eli. And
Really?
And so we got so close, and got a different plan. And so that was November of 2002. And our local adoption social worker, who had helped us facilitate a lot of the administrative hurdles of this process, kept our information on file. We told her, look, we're not hard pressed to adopt. There are lots of families who want to adopt, and don't put us to the head of the line for anybody, in front of anybody. Give us a call when you think the case is right. So, man, there are a lot of details to this story, so I'm going to try not to bore you, but get the important stuff in because there's a lot of God stuff going on here. March of 03, my wife gets a call. She's on spring break, and our social worker calls and leaves a voicemail on her work line, and basically saying, "Hey, there's this little boy being born. He needs a family. Give me a call." Well, my wife's on spring break. I think maybe we had a cell phone then, or she had a cell phone, but she definitely had our phone number, and she didn't call it. Well, 5 days later, my wife gets back, inquires about it, and baby's already been placed. Okay, opportunity lost. We're a little hacked off about it, but so be it. 5 weeks later, we get a phone call. No, 5 weeks later, I'm at work one night. As you mentioned, I'm in law enforcement at the time. I was pushing a cruiser as a uniformed police officer. We're getting ready to go out of town to Chicago the next day. I come into work, and we're above our minimum staffing requirements. We have to maintain a certain level all the time. Well, we're above that, and I decide I'm going home. I'm not going to work tonight. I'm going to take vacation and get ready to leave tomorrow morning to go to Chicago, visit friends, and get home. We get a phone call about 9:30, 10 o'clock that night from the same social worker. And she said, "Hey, there's this little boy. He's in Dayton Children's Hospital. Been tremendously sick with herpes encephalitis. Has some level of brain damage. We don't know what, but he needs a family. He's about to be discharged from the hospital at the end of this week." And had I not been home, I wouldn't have been there when Cindy got that phone call. And so we said, okay, we're not going to Chicago tomorrow. We're going to Dayton Children's Hospital. We're going to meet this kid. So we call her mom and dad. She calls her mom and dad. They're going to come join us in the NICU. At the time, a good family friend from our church was a ER doc at Dayton Children's, and a woman my mother was counseling was a NICU nurse. And so they met us at the hospital. The same doctor friend has a brother who's an ER doctor at Dayton Children's who was the attending physician the night this little boy came into the ER. Well, this little boy, obviously I'm talking about Dominic. And so at least 8 or 9 of us in the NICU meet Dominic for the first time. We've got medical professionals reading the chart, telling us about prognosis. The NICU nurse who is able to just give her best sense of how sick he is or has been or what his prognosis is from her many, many contacts with kids who've been deathly ill at that age, this like 5 weeks old. Come to find out, Dominic is the boy that my wife got a phone call about 5 weeks before on spring break. He had, in the meantime, been placed with another family, and at 2 weeks old, laying on the man's chest, quit breathing. Got rushed to the hospital, spent the last prior 3 weeks in the hospital in critical care, herpes ravaging his brain, and swelling his brain is what encephalitis is. And he's now, that's under control, but we don't know what level of damage is done. Well, the family that he had been placed with said, and this is no discredit to them, it's a hard thing. They said, we didn't bargain for this. We can't take on a disabled child. So they relinquished the placement back to the social worker and the adoption agency, which was Adoption Lincoln in Yellow Springs, fantastic agency. So that morning we met Dominic and knew that the right thing to do was to give this child a home. In fact, Cindy was holding him at one point, and he's got tubes tied to him, and heart monitor, apnea monitor, and all this. And the social worker says, "Hey, you want us to walk out of the room and you and Jason can talk about this?" And my father-in-law looked at her and said, "If you don't already know that this boy's going home with them, you don't have to do that. This decision's already been made." And he was right. We knew that it was right that God was placing him in our family and that we needed to bring him home. As the case was, Dominic's also African-American, biracial, in some mix. And race was never a factor for us. In the family of God, there is no Jew or Greek, no free or slave, right? And so, as to use a mix of the old King James references that I grew up on for that terminology. So that made no difference for us what the race of this baby was. We knew that he was a human, he was loved by God, and was going to be loved by us. So we brought him home not knowing what his prognosis was. As he grew and developed, and we were relatively certain that he was not no longer being affected by the herpes itself, and just had some residual brain damage, it was clear that he was going to have some deficits. We just didn't know to what extent. But he was able to get off the heart monitor and the apnea monitor over the course of months and start to lead an untethered life, if you will, to medical machinery. And then somewhere around 18 months, between 12 and 18 months, it became clear that he was going to have physical deficits that started us immediately into therapies, physical therapies, occupational therapies, physical being the big movements, and occupational being the finer movements. And occupational came kind of later as those deficits became more apparent. And he's only just quit therapy literally within the last half year, because it's a lifelong thing to try to, especially in the first 5 years, it's very important that your neural connections, your brain developed an incredible capacity to rewire itself. And so he was in therapy very early on, and he's done wonderful, but he's greatly impacted in his life from the damage that was done from the herpes, which he presumably caught from his birth mother via natural childbirth. That's been the working theory the entire time. So she didn't have any prenatal care as we understand it. So that's a critical piece of this, and for would-be mothers, is to have prenatal care.
So how old is Dominic now?
Dom's 21. Just finished his last year of schooling, and we're in the middle of transitioning from childhood supports through the state and county to adult supports, moving from job and family services kind of supports that he is entitled to Social Security and disability, and what does that look like for job and further job training and transportation. And it's a chaotic mess of a system that we live in for those kind of things. There are wonderful people working in it, but there are so many strings that can be pulled to try to weave together a life of supports and training and transportation and aids and job locations that will accommodate a person who wants to work, wants to be in the community, wants to serve, wants to bring joy to people, which is Dominic's spiritual gift. And how does all that mix together? Oh gosh, it is so confusing. And we're living that right now. It really is.
Yeah. I want to back up just a little bit here and have you share with us what it was like, because you have two other children, what it was like finding a balance between what had to be a lot of time and energy put into Dominic when you've got two other children. And then there's also the challenges that I'm sure was existent between you and your wife, because both of you are career people. You've got lives, even as individuals, and then you're married. So that's a lot. So we're going to take another time out, and when we come back, as you think about that, I want you to share with us about the dynamics, the family life dynamics that are present when raising a special needs child. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams. My guest today is Jason Messer. More with him after this.
Do you know a new father who could benefit from a basic introduction to healthy fathering principles? POPS 101, a free online course consisting of 4 one-hour sessions in English or Spanish, could be perfect for him. Pops 101 lays out practical steps toward becoming the protector, order keeper, provider, and stabilizer his child needs. Learn more at urbanlight.org.
Our guest today on this installment of the Father and Strong podcast is Jason Messer. Jason, what advice, well, before we get to that, share with us what it was like juggling and managing all the various dynamics that were present as you were raising this child with his challenges, while also having two other children and a wife, plus a career.
Right. So, haven't really touched on it, but our to introduce, we also have an 18-year-old daughter, also adopted, that we're just so immensely proud of, and completely 180-degree different kind of situation. No medical deficits, brilliant, beautiful girl, and her adoption story also kind of dropped in our laps in a way, which is atypical for that. But so her name's Ellie, and so she came in 3 years later. So you've got 3 years apart each of them, all the way, obviously, and so juggling. My wife is a professor at Cedarville University. She teaches English and education, and she's always had a job we're very grateful for that's very flexible. Mine's flexible, and the benefits are great, and the ability to take time and get off in an emergency or in a pinch has been wonderful, and not everyone has that. So I'm very grateful for the roles that the employment roles that we found ourselves in, because it's aided. There's no two ways about it. The flexibility and the options we've had has helped aid and support our family. And when there have been emergencies, we've had the recourse to take off, or to take in many cases, Dominic, I can't tell you how many times he's gone to the college with my wife because of one reason or another, and her job allowed for that. The dynamics of at home, juggling that. For a long time, I was on a different shift. I'd work second shift. And there were a lot of points in my career where I was upset that I didn't get this job transfer, this promotion. And with the benefit of hindsight, I look at it and can 100% honestly say the Lord was arranging our life in a way that it helped me to better support my family at a time when I needed to support my family through my later position, the ones that provide even more flexibility, like when I was in investigations or when I became a supervisor and ended up working third shift, And so being the nature of a police officer, you're not always in control of all those things, but I've been in a blessed position to be able to do that where I work. And so between the two of us, I have a supremely understanding and flexible wife and knows the demands on my job. And for me, when I know that my professional needs or personal needs or schedule has been a real drain on her, if I am not giving when I'm at home to be able to say, hey, I'll take care of dinner or the dishes, or I will go pick this child up or that child up, rather than just falling back and saying, I'm exhausted, woe is me, I need you to do that. If I'm not giving back like that, then I'm not serving my wife, and I'm not loving her the way she needs to be loved, because not all of that can fall on her. And too much of it does already by nature, given the role women play in the home. And so we juggled that because we each were putting in 100% all the time, as I see it. And so something as simple as, who's doing the dishes tonight isn't a matter of argument. It should not be a matter of argument. It should be someone stepping up, or the guy stepping up. In my case, I tried to, and this is not to sing great things about me. I'm just trying to say this is how we handled it. Because when one person's been carrying the weight, the other person has to come in and carry some other weight to take that load off. That's how marriage should be.
Yeah. Wow, I'm exhausted just listening to that.
I'm exhausted just listening to me too. I get it. I understand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kudos to you and Cindy for the great job you have done and are doing as parents. It's inspirational to me and hopefully to those who are watching this podcast. And it should give us a greater appreciation for those who reach out beyond their own biological family to bring into their family children who need a parent. And my closing thought today, I'll share something about the heart of God when it comes to that. Well, listen, Jason, I want to thank you so much. And for all of you who are listening today, I want to say we really appreciate you being here. Our guest has been Jason Messer. We could go on and on about this. And Jason, I'd like to think about maybe coming back on at another time, because I know we only covered just a part of your fatherhood journey. That would be great. I'd like I got a
lot of failures to share. So feel free to invite me back. I'm a kind of an open book, because I got a lot of hard lessons learned.
That would be great.
Touch on.
That would be great. And now Bruce, who's been silent because he's in the background working on the technical aspects of this. He is the grandfather of special needs children and has some stories as well. It would be neat maybe to have the both of you have a conversation about that. I would love to be a fly on the wall and hear the two of you talk about the challenges that are involved in that. So, but that's all we have time for today on the Fathering Strong podcast. So I want to thank you for being with us, Jason, and thank you, listening audience. Next week, we're going to be talking with Richard Quisenberry. Coach Quiz is another fascinating guy. He's a parent, he's a coach, and he mentors young men and goes to several schools in the area on a regular basis, providing programming to mentor these young boys. So it'll be great to hear his story about being in these kids' lives, as well as being a parent and a coach and all of that. Fathering Strong is available beyond this podcast. We also have a weekly Fathering Strong blog post that we would love to have you to take a look at if you aren't already subscribed to it. You can find it at urbanlight.org or fatheringstrong.com. Check it out. Our weekly Fathering Strong blog. We'd love to have you subscribe to that. The Holy Scriptures give insight into God's heart for children. Psalm 68 tells us he is a father to the fatherless and a judge and protector of the widows is God in his holy habitation. When we reach out with unselfish love to a child other than our own biological children, we are following his example of love and compassion. May the Lord bless you as you give your child, whether biological or not, what no one else on earth can, your fully developed father love. That's Fathering Strong.
Fathering Strong is powered by Urban Light Ministries, a not-for-profit organization serving the needs of families and children for nearly 30 years. Your support helps us continue turning the hearts of fathers to their children while meeting some of the immediate critical needs of struggling families with small children. Contributions of all sizes are welcomed at www.urbanlight.org.
The Fathering Strong podcast is a production of Urban Light Ministries, with technical assistance from the Momentum Group, and Harold Rayford provides the theme music. So thank you for listening.